Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the event today. I am very excited to be here and to present this exciting event called Citizen Development at Work, Upskilling Employees and Transforming Enterprises. My name is Christian Peverelli. I am the co-founder of We Are No Code. We're an institute to empower non-technical founders, and we are so blessed to be able to be the moderators of this event that's being put on by PMI Consulting, which is the Product Management Institute, as well as 2DR, the Second Digital Revolution. We have such an amazing set of people here who are going to be talking about this phenomenon called citizen development, also called no code makers. There are so many different ways to talk about it. It's really empowering millions of people around the world, and it is a massive game changer. So I wanted to go, first of all, the setting's going to be relatively casual. We like to keep this conversational. We want everyone to be asking questions throughout the different talks. The structure of this event is going to be, we're starting off with a keynote put on by Alwyn Magame. We're then going to be jumping into a fireside chat with Richard Early and Dolo Mia. And after that, we are going to be having a panel discussion. So we actually have a lot of exciting stuff here for you today. We are so blessed to be able to put this on. Again, I wanted to thank everyone who's behind the scene. You know, I show up and I'm able to just kind of present. There are so many people putting this on who have made this happen. So I just wanted to thank everyone who's involved to get this started off. So I think the way that we'll start it is by simply jumping straight into the keynote presentation presented by Alwyn Magame. He is the Senior Managing Director at FTI Consulting, and he's served as the EMEA Chief Digital Officer as well. So in just a little moment, we're going to be bringing in Alwyn, and I believe that before that, we have a short video presentation. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get this party started. Alwyn, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Christian. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, and over here in California, it's 7:30 a.m. Over there in London, it is 3:30 p.m. Is that correct?
Yeah, and warm, very warm, unusually warm. Yeah, we're not used to this kind of warm weather.
Oh, that's amazing. Usually it's me telling people that, but at the moment it hasn't been so warm in California. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us. I know that you have a huge amount of experience in different areas. I think the best way to kick this off is maybe you give us a little introduction to yourself. I will be recusing myself from this from this presentation, and I'll let you lead the way. Again, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Christian. So, hello, everyone, and I'm delighted to be here to take a little bit of your time to present something that's very close to my heart. In this role, I am a strategic advisor to the Project Management Institute, an organization I care very deeply about. And what I'd like to talk to you is about citizen development, and more importantly, how citizen development can help accelerate digital transformation in a world I call the never normal. So over 12 minutes or so, I'd like to just share with you some perspectives. It's a short time, so it'll be high level. And the idea is that I'll break it into three parts. Firstly, I'll tell you a bit about my perspective on the never normal and why businesses need to accelerate their transformation efforts. Then I'll talk about what makes a good citizen developer, what are the components of citizen development, and how that can help accelerate digital transformation or business transformation. And finally, I'll show you and I'll demonstrate how PMI is enabling a citizen revolution and how PMI is enabling the movement of citizen development. I just want to do a quick check. Guys, can you hear me? You can hear me okay, yeah? Okay, perfect. That's great. Now, if we can move on to my presentation, that will be massively helpful, yeah? Okay, so, so I call this digital transformation in the never normal, yeah? And if we look at the world that we're in now, my belief is there's no such thing as the new normal. If you look back over the last 15 months, the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity, VUCA, means that we're entering a world where everything we do or everything we experience, or everything businesses need to adapt and be flexible about is going to be in a state of perpetual beta, or what I term as the never normal. And if you look at the data, you can see that between 1997 and about 2007, the uncertainty index for GEPU was roughly up and down, but you could see it's about a straight line. But if you look at 2007 to 2021, you could see it's going up. It's only getting more uncertain. And especially over the last 12 months, you've seen how the uncertainty index has become a lot more uncertain. But in the meantime, adoption is really taking up at pace. Yeah, if you look at new things that are being introduced into the world, and this is just a simple chart I picked from the internet that shows the time it takes to get to 50 million users. You can see the pace of adoption is really accelerating. Therefore, we prepared for a world that effectively was sequential, and we did things in a sequential way. The diagram on the left. We did a strategy. We said, what's our strategy? Then we did some design around it. Then we built and architected the transformation program, and then we realized the value. And we did that over 3 to 5 years. But the reality is, what happened was what's on the right. A little bit of chaos, ambiguity, uncertainty. And when I was in McKinsey's, we did a study, and we found that almost 70% of digital transformation efforts ended in some degree of failure. Either they failed outright or they didn't achieve the expected outcomes. And why is that? Yeah, why such a high failure rate? And I think the result is a couple of things. So firstly, I think there's this real shift in disruption from what we call the service-based economy to the experience-based economy. And it's really being shaped by new behaviors. You know that, right? If we take remote working as an example, if 15 months ago, if somebody came to me and said, Alvin, the majority of your workforce will work from home and productivity will actually go up, I'd be very uncertain, right? I think really, majority of my workforce at home, productivity actually goes up. And I would have expected at that point the opposite. But the reality has shown that remote working actually works. It's an expectation. It's part of the fabric now. And you cannot have a strategy going forward without some level of extensive remote working underpinned by technology. There's also new expectations and the maturity of new technologies. Expectations really driven by the millennials, where they expect everything to work like an iPhone does. And the maturity of new technologies around AI or machine learning or 3D printing, really emphasizing the shift from service to experience. And the manifestation of that is you see the valuation of the companies, right? The most valuable companies today are experience-based. But in the meantime, what's accelerating this shift from service to experience? I think it's technology abstraction. Technology is being abstracted to such a level that actually myself, you, and the business users and our colleagues can actually achieve quite complex outcomes without the need to understand technology. And what I have here is an analogy based on cars. Yeah. So if you look at the 1900s, you needed to be a mechanical engineer to drive a car. And today, to drive a car, you literally just need to know how to use an iPhone. The objective of a car to get from A to B hasn't changed. At least for now, you need a driver. But the technology and the complexity and the safety systems and all the kind of technology that underpins a car has been abstracted from the driver, that you are literally just having your hands on the wheels, while in most cars today, the autopilot will do the rest. And you can see that, and this kind of manifestation is happening in many places around the world. Yeah. Let me just move on to my screen. Okay, so therefore, if technology has been abstracted, I love this quote from Robert Woolcock, right, Professor of Innovation at Kellogg. He said, learning to code will eventually be as useful as learning Latin. And I so wholeheartedly believe it. You think about the complexity of Siri, right? And you should be able to then say in, let's say, a couple of years, maybe not now, but maybe in 5 years' time, we should be able to say, Siri, build me an app. And if you think about the underlying complexity of Siri today, you say, Siri, play me a song. Yeah, well, you don't have to really understand computational linguistics to translate your voice and into something that Siri can understand. You don't have to understand algorithmic search to go find the music. You don't have to understand digital physical translation to play the music. And that kind of complexity will be abstracted, that Siri will be able to build you an app. Can you imagine a world where practitioners can get Siris to build apps? And this world is what I call a hyper-agile world. So if we think about the last 50 years, what we planned for, waterfall, sequential, step-by-step, structured, somewhat inflexible. It enabled computerization, systems integration, MRP, ERP. Then we moved into agile, incremental, iterative, flexible, more predictable. And as the technology becomes more abstracted, we're moving into a hyper-agile world, which is accelerated, devolved. It'll empower. So you hear edge computing, computing at the edge. You hear edge analytics, analytics at the edge. I think you will hear business transformation or digital transformation at the edge, where users, business users can actually affect quite significant amount of change because they can become part of this, what I'm calling a citizen revolution, right? And underpinning that are technology platforms like low code, no code. So if employees at the edge can affect change, if digital transformation needs to enter into a hyper-agile world, then we've coined this term in PMI called a change maker, anybody that can affect a change. And what we're saying is that a citizen developer is an empowered change maker, can deliver business outcomes, an employee with an understanding of business processes, a project manager that can help organize, a person comfortable with technology. And what can a citizen developer do? They can solve problems, long delivery cycles, efficiency and productivity, something that's quite close to my heart, innovation at pace. In waterfall, it might have taken 6 months. In agile, it might have taken 6 weeks. In hyper agile, if it takes 6 days, you can actually innovate at pace. Citizens can actually do things that help the innovation accelerate a company's ability to test new ideas and concepts and figure out what works and what does and what doesn't here. And they can solve integration between different departments. So with that in mind, if you then follow my train of thought around the fact that hyperagility in a never normal is what's critical for organizations to continue to survive, then citizen development will become a cornerstone of how change makers can help organizations be successful. And citizen development is only one part of the citizen revolution. I fully see a future where there will be citizen data scientists, citizen agile practitioners, citizen project managers, because the technology will enable citizens to achieve quite complex outcomes. So PMI's vision is very clear. Enable individuals and enterprises to successfully accelerate, and the word accelerate is important, right? Because digital transformation is happening today. Accelerate digital transformation by providing an agnostic, so it doesn't matter what car you drive, it provides an agnostic framework, method, training, certification, and thought leadership that turn ideas to reality. So in a simple way, you could buy a Ford, you could buy a Tesla, which means you could buy any low-code, no-code platform, you can buy any technology you want. With the technology comes the ability to understand the features and functions of that technology. But what PMI provides is the ability to learn how to drive safely. It teaches you to drive safely in an agnostic way. So you can drive any car, you can use any platform, and you can deliver change regardless of the underlying technology because it gives you this framework, this training, this certification. Now that's our vision. It's very clear. But you can't have a vision if you don't have a set of core beliefs, yeah? And these are core beliefs. All transformation programs will need to leverage citizen development. I don't think you can start a transformation program today in a hyper-agile world if you don't leverage citizen development. Organizations will need to embrace this new hyper-agile way of working, and so will you. Therefore, understanding and being capable in citizen development will become a critical success factor. It just follows on. Organizations will then use citizen developers as an innovation vehicle to accelerate innovation at pace. And if you believe those four things, then the fifth will be having a credential and experience in citizen development will become a valuable job differentiator. And these are the set of core beliefs that underpin PMI's clear vision around citizen development and the acceleration of digital or business transformation efforts in a hyper-agile world that's never normal, would be the kind of summary that I'd put out there. So what exactly is, what exactly does it take to become proficient at good citizen development? It's an understanding of these 7 areas, yeah? So from an organizational perspective, it's understanding how you govern these programs, how you create accountability, what are the rules of engagement within IT, because ultimately it's technology that's helping you abstract the complexity to allow a citizen developer. It's about value delivery and tracking so that you don't get into a situation where these programs fail. It's about capability development from a business perspective. What capabilities lend itself to citizen development? You're not going to build a new ERP system or a billing system or a transaction system with citizen development, but we're going to do a lot, but not everything. And you need to understand which technology capabilities can underpin and help you accelerate your citizen development journey. And that's what PMI brings to the table. It gives you this understanding so that you can drive safely. You know where an accident might occur. You know what the rules of the highway is. And so that you can drive any car that you're faced with. And then finally, there's project delivery. There's project execution, there's strategy and planning. And when you put all together, these are the kind of domains that create a successful citizen developer. Now, PMI have created a couple of training programs to enable this. A foundation program teaches you the basic concepts. A practitioner program help you build scalable applications. An architect facilitates CD projects within an organization. And finally, a strategist is what we're thinking of if you want to go from company to company and help them become really, really competent in this capability. Now, where do you start? Take the first steps in the citizen revolution. Download the book of knowledge. You can go to these websites. We'll put it on the link where you can download the book of knowledge. You can join the community. 10,000 people are already part of this community where you can share ideas, get thought leadership, look at videos, become enable. And then you can get enable. You can go for that training that I talked about, right? And all of this will help you take the first steps in the citizen revolution. Now, that's pretty much all I had to say. I know it's been very quick. I encourage you to go to the link. It gives a lot more detail and a lot more stories that this revolution is embracing. Now, I think what I'll do is I will pass back to the moderator to see if there are any questions. Yeah.
Hey, Alwyn, that was amazing. Thank you so much for the presentation. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, I can.
Excellent. I can. Great. Yeah, no, I mean, so what Alwyn really just brought us through was really the context behind this revolution, which, is called citizen development, and has really explained to us why it's becoming increasingly necessary for people to transform themselves. And then he also presented us a couple of options for him to start, for people to start, which are, depending on what use case you're looking for, there's a different program PMI has created for that. Alwyn, tell us what got you into this and how did you get started in citizen development? Because it's obviously a fascinating topic, and I think a lot of people watching are interested in understanding people's journeys.
Yeah, I think, I've spent my whole life as a consultant. I've never had a real job, right? I keep telling my wife. And as part of that, I've helped a lot of companies transform. And I've been through a couple of waves of transformation, right? The early days of ERP, then the internet, then the mobile wave, and now the digital and data wave, right? And I'm always fascinated with how quickly people can change. And when you empower people at the edge, actually people who need to do the work, people who understand the processes, people who understand what works and what doesn't, when you empower them, you can actually accelerate transformation. So hyper agility was the framing that got me really excited. But what powers hyper agility? The citizens. Now, some people might look at the word citizens and think, does it, actually it's any business person that has an understanding of business, has an appreciation of technology with the PMI content about how to drive the car safely, can embrace the revolution.
I love that. I love that. And it is really that combination between the sort of technology and tools and then also the frameworks and understanding sort of what you're doing. I always say, oftentimes people are, the best coders and people who do citizen developers or no coders, they're building things that don't necessarily have demand. So there's just this combination between like not getting too caught up with the tools and using the tools within the right context so they, bring the right outcomes. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, one question I get asked: what happens to the coders, right? What happens to the developers, right? So I think what will happen is like any of these kind of new technological disruptors, the pie will just get bigger. Low coders will exist with high coders in synergy, because the high coders will focus on truly the difficult stuff, right? It's what the top half of the backlog, where it's complex, it requires a lot of complexity, that you can actually take the low coders and say, you know what, you focus on the bottom half of the backlog, you focus on the stuff that actually enables businesses to accelerate outcomes. But there will always be a place for high coders to coexist with low coders, because the pie will just get bigger. We'll just do more, and we'll just do it quicker, right? Because we're hyper agile.
I love that. And so what would you say for people who are looking to kind of champion this movement, who are now, they've listened to your presentation, they're excited about it. How can they get the word out about this movement?
Well, I would think join the community at PMI, right? That would be the first step. Come, sign up, join the community, see what the community is doing, and then download the book of knowledge, right? Because we spent 12 months talking to over 30 experts, 52 organizations, and 752 leaders in order to put together that book of knowledge, right? There's a real wealth of knowledge there. So I would say absorb that. And then go back to your organization and say, if I was going to start a citizen revolution, what do I need to do, right? How does business and IT come together? How can I affect change? And how can I do it within the context of what the company is already doing?
Very inspirational, Alwyn. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really, it was great to get a really good introduction to everything, so that we can, when we go into further topics now, people have a much better understanding of what we're talking about. So I appreciate you joining. And look forward to signing up myself also for the PMI book, and for the also they have a great podcast for those of you who have not ever tuned in and listened to that. Thank you so much, Alwyn.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you, everyone.
Excellent. So that was a great presentation. Thanks for everyone who stuck around. We are now going to go into the next section of this amazing event. It is going to be called How Companies Are Using Citizen Development for Transformation. It is going to be a fireside chat between Richard Early, who is from the Project Management Institute, with Dolo Mia from Capgemini. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation, talking more about how we're sort of using these technologies within the context of enterprise and how it's driving transformation. So short video introduction to that, and then we'll be on stage with the two different people who will be speaking. Gentlemen, I see that you're frozen and ready. We're ready, right?
Hey, Christian.
Yeah, good to go.
How are you doing,
Hey,
Richard? How are you doing, Dolo?
Very good, thank you, Christian.
Yeah, good, thanks.
So I will let you
Yeah,
two kick this one off. We'll maybe start off, if each of you could give a short sort of explanation of your background and what you do within the company that you work for. Maybe starting with Dolo.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. So my name's Dolo Mia. I work for Capgemini. I'm part of our group technology, innovation and ventures function. What we're doing there is looking at the major emerging technologies and their evolutions and the implications of that. And we have a CTIO network that we have to look at these things, and I run that. And as part of that network, I also look at the standards. What are the standards that are evolving and emerging that will be required to help shape these emerging technologies and adopt them in a robust way?
Very, very interesting. Wow, this is going to be fascinating. Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself and the perspective that you'll bring to this fireside chat.
So I've been working in consulting for about 8.5 years now. Started off in data science and then moved into digital transformation and kind of became aware of citizen development about 2 years ago. And then for the last about 18 months to 2 years, I've been working with PMI as interim head of product, developing the whole suite of kind of citizen developer products, starting out with the book, that I think Alvin mentioned, which was the kind of combined knowledge of experts from around the world. And then since then we've released the foundations course, we've released the practitioner course, we're soon to release the business architect course, and have a couple of more embers on the fire that will kind of come out over the next few months.
Excellent. Okay. Well, in that case, I think we can get this this panel started. I will be exiting from this this room, but if you need anything, just look at the screen really weird, and I'll understand something needs to happen. I'll jump back in, and we'll figure something out. If you need questions from the public, by the way, anyone in the audience, please send any of your questions through in the chat so that we can see them. We have our friend Niels in the background who is looking at those.
Thanks, Christian.
Oh, thanks a million, Christian. So hey, Dalo, and hey to everybody watching at home. I thought what might be a good way to kind of kickstart this conversation is to look at, because obviously citizen development, or the idea of it, if not the term, has been kind of around for a while. When I was kind of researching it, when I first got into it, I saw that as early as 1982, there was a book written about the idea of creating applications without programmers. Now, obviously, they were many years away from it, but it was at least alive as a concept at the time. We've had a kind of maybe a couple of false dawns, a couple of what seems like citizen development, but what's not quite. The technology wasn't quite there, certainly not in a full stack sense, where you can go from back end, creating your tables, joining them, creating the middle end logic, and creating the front end as a whole kind of package to this technology. So we're kind of finally over the last couple of years at that point, but I don't know that it's necessarily just the technology that's going to put us in a position to really embrace citizen development. So I guess the first question is quite simply, why now? Why is citizen development taking off now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. In terms of the why now, of course, we know that the world has changed. I mean, just look at the last 18 months that we've all had to go through, well, since around March last year anyway. The pandemic has completely upturned what enterprises need to do in terms of being massively adaptable, completely unpredictable in terms of what's going to happen next. And all that's done is actually fueled the need for further technology exploitation and adaptation. If anything, we've always heard about how agility was needed for enterprises over the years, and IT not being able to keep up with the business. The pandemic has just completely lit another fuse under all of that, and so now we need hyper agility, and beyond that, we need to have a completely different way of being able to exploit the technology. I mean, just as a as a point, because I heard earlier what Alvin was saying, and what you just said now, the idea of low code has been around for a long time indeed. I mean, I've been a software engineer since the early 90s. That's where I started. But even before then, we had these things called fourth generation languages, right? So that was why was it fourth generation? Well, way back, I'm talking about before both of our times, first generation languages were very, very machine orientated, right? They were literally flipping the bits and the bytes on the front panel of a computer to try and give it the instructions you want, typically used by research scientists, people in white coats, that kind of thing. Then the advancement was to the second generation, which was only a tiny step above. And what we've now seen, and what we mostly sort of see software engineers use, is mainly what we call third generation languages. So these are what we call high level languages that allow us to program the computer in using roughly English-like words, but still very much in the software engineering domain. Fourth generation has been around definitely since the 80s. The idea of being able to visually engineer or drag and drop things, it's been around for a long time. But there's been a number of, I think, over promises where there's been a few false dawns, as you said, where the tool has been promising something that either it wasn't ready for or we weren't ready for in terms of our environment. So I think the changes and why now are, one is the huge demand for pace in the enterprise. And the second is that now the 4GL and now what we will call the low-code tools that citizen developers can use are becoming more advanced. They're maturing. It's been maturing for a very long time, but certainly in the last few years, there's been a decent step up in terms of that. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at in Capgemini is around the impact of low code on this hyper agility, we have something that we call Technovision. That's our annual publication where we are setting out what we think are the trends in technology and how to exploit that technology for enterprise transformation. In there, there's a section about applications. And one of the trends in applications, we call it Applications Unleashed. And within there, there's a trend called When Code Goes Low, because the citizen developer movement is now burgeoning. And it's because of all of the things we've just said in terms of the need for hyper agility. The overall theme actually is what we call is be like water. Right? Now the point about this is that it's not just agility, it's really being flexible. And to be able to combine that with citizen development, you also need to have an enterprise sort of top-down way of addressing that. So we call it StratOps. I won't go into any too much detail right now. Obviously, if folks want to have a look at that, I'd certainly recommend they have a little read of what we think there. But that's really the why now. This is the right time.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I guess. From what you said there, kind of brings up a number of different kind of questions and concerns that probably especially people who aren't particularly familiar with citizen development and might worry about what it might mean, because the idea of just saying all these things that used to be maybe created by people who really knew what they were doing and had studied it for years and had all the skill set, we're now going to give it to business people who don't actually know anything about coding and stuff. And also that there's probably the concern about, say, shadow IT. So we've heard so many stories, and it's kind of it's such a common phrase these days of people creating, say, VBA macros that do the process and they do their job, and then they leave the job, and then everyone's scratching their head because they don't know how to work VBA and they don't quite know what this macro does and how to pick it apart. Now, I don't think I think citizen development very much, especially when done in a kind of government controlled way, very much answers the question about shadow IT. But I thought it might be worth us discussing that a little bit, just to kind of allay any concerns that there's going to be hundreds of apps just proliferating around companies that the IT team or the kind of wider company don't know anything about.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about shadow IT a little bit, because I think it has a negative connotation. It definitely has a negative connotation. Shadow IT was really a term originally, which was applications or technology being created outside the knowledge of IT and therefore seen as a risk and maybe a sunk cost that didn't have any benefit. So it was really seen as a thing to avoid when we had centralized IT. I think really with citizen development and generally as well in terms of enterprise agility, what we're heading towards is a more of a devolved model, devolved IT model. It's not about every request that the business has going to the central IT and then it executes that, but we're actually having IT functions across business areas. This has been a movement that we've seen over a few years as part of the DevOps and the Agile world. Okay, so that's why we call it StratOps, by the way, is that we're moving from development to accelerate development to operations to strategy to operations. That's really what the idea of StratOps is, and you do that by devolving your capabilities. Now, to devolve capabilities requires a common playing field, right? So you need some sort of consensus as an enterprise on what devolvement means. And it goes back to your earlier point about why now. We have the platforms, we have evolving platforms around low code, which are becoming better and more suited for the citizen development. But on top of the platforms, number one, you need people, you need the right people. And that's something to consider, which is that folks who are not coders or software engineers by background, yes, they can use these tools, but they'll need some training. They'll need some awareness of what are the rules of play. And that those people will basically be asked to engage and understand what are the policies of the enterprise, what are the patterns and the practices. Now, if we can get those standards essentially established within the enterprise in terms of how to use and where to use low code, what we'll find is that this devolved IT will be very agile, very responsive to the business needs. And it'll be a hybrid operating model where we have citizen developers and we have software engineers. It won't be moving all of the coding work to citizen developers.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that you hear as maybe So a bit of a concern that some developers, and I think Alvin touched on this in his talk, that is this kind of like drivers being worried about autonomous vehicles coming in, and that there's no longer a need for anyone to be driven anywhere by a person. And there could understandably be a concern that, does this mean that there's no need for coders anymore? Now, I think it's, when you think about the kind of really complex sort of applications underpinning enterprises, I don't think anyone's suggesting that you know, someone from the business who has no kind of background in software engineering or understands the logic of how that works is going to take that on. But also, I suppose, do software engineers, software developers, do they have anything to be concerned about, or is this more likely to be something that, because we all know there's a massive shortage of software developers at the moment, and really what people are talking about more than anything is the fact that there's so much in backlogs and so much that can't get done, and so much that, and especially these kind of maybe smaller, not mission critical apps that would massively help certain departments or certain teams, but they're just not, that they can't get onto the radar of an IT team because the backlog is just too large, and there's things that are just deemed and are more important to the company itself. So where software developers may feel, oh, is this going to take my job? Really, it's just going to allow for more development, more kind of development, and touch on the things you said, like hyper agility, allow to kind of transform in this kind of quicker way. But as a software, I know you're a former software engineer yourself. That's now kind of getting into the citizen development world. So I just wondered, what were your thoughts on, do software developers have anything to be concerned about, or is this more of a relief to them? They can sigh relief that now there's no one knock at their door for the kind of smaller stuff anymore, and they can kind of focus on the more mission critical stuff.
No, I agree. I think relief is probably a good way to summarize it. But let's just see what the industry is saying. Okay, so there is a famous venture capitalist technology VC called Andreessen Horowitz, right? So one of the biggest VCs in Silicon Valley. I mean, their sort of strapline is software is eating the world. Okay, so number one, they're right. Everything that we're going to be doing in enterprise going forward is absolutely going to be software enabled, technology enabled. Then you look at what industry observers and analysts are saying. So Gartner, for example, are saying that software development demand is going to outstrip IT's ability by 5 times. Okay, I mean, that is a huge gap. There is no shortage of things to do, but there is a shortage of supply to people be able to do it. Now, what low code does for me then is absolutely, it allows us to shift left in a way to self-serve some of those apps that the business knows what they want. We still need software engineering. We need architecture, software engineering. We need good data management. We need good security and resilience management of the whole technology estate. And those are still very much in the engineering and the architecture space. We don't need our business users to become experts at that. What we can do though with low code, and this is for me an important part, when you want to go from what you know as a business user that you want to the implementation of that, so my intent to execution, typically you would say to a business analyst, oh, I would like X, and they would write some requirements down, or you put them on a backlog and you go through some agile sprints, but you have a technology team essentially implementing it. Low code, and what I call that the semantic gap, okay? The semantics of what the business user wants, and they know what they want, versus the technology implementer who knows how to explain that to the machine. Now, low code is narrowing that semantic gap, but not for everything that you want to do. I mean, not many businesses or business users think about and need to believe they need to think about. So what does it mean for my distributed security? What about data protection? You know, is this data going to the right place? Am I transforming it in the right way? What about making sure that the quality of the data that I've got in the back end is right? So there's a load of other hard problems. The new architectures like Edge and distributed architectures, IoT, all of these things are just adding more complexity to the enterprise. So there's going to be plenty of really interesting and hard problems that software engineers with the computer science background and the engineering background, we will need to work on. And then we have this kind of almost, it's not bimodal, but if you like, what I would like to explain is the fact that then you have this area where low code can fit. and that allows me as a business user to go from my idea to implementation, literally from brain through my fingers into the computer. That semantic gap being narrowed, it's another reason why I think from a CD point of view, so citizen development is part of the StratOps approach. Yeah, so my strategy or my intent as a business, be able to execute it. That's what CD opens up. But it allows then, as you say, the software engineering and the IT operations to really focus on the hard problems and make sure that all of it keeps running. Right. Most business users, actually most developers, being honest, like to create things, and then they were not going to worry about the operation. They want it to just work, right? So there's a whole heap of stuff that's required to keep things working and keep things resilient, safe from attack, etc. There's a whole bunch of stuff. One other point I just want to mention, because I think folks might hear terms like like microservices and APIs and that kind of thing. This is still the realm of software engineering. You wouldn't ask a business user to decide on the microservice architecture. It's a close collaboration between business and IT, but I would leave it with engineers to kind of shape and implement those things. So there's plenty there. 5 times more demand than supply, and the need for hyper agility to narrow that semantic gap.
Yeah, and on that as well. So I completely agree. I think there's going to be plenty of space for both, but I also think it's probably not a clear delineation between, we've got the business users using no code, low code, and we've got the software developers still doing everything in coding. There's not only will it say not take the applications that they were going to build from them, but I already know that it's happening. So many software developers, they actually want to use these no-code and low-code tools themselves, because they don't necessarily want to do what might be considered like every job has its kind of boring bits. And being a software developer, you probably want to use your kind of innovative, creative side, and you want to be kind of pushing the envelope a bit. And some of the kind of standard rote tasks that they might consider boring, or if not boring, at least just time-consuming, that they're not getting to go quick enough. So what I've seen is a lot of people from kind of the IT department that they want to use these themselves, and I know that has kind of begun with the likes of low code, and I think the kind of thinking has been kind of on no code for business developers, low code for developers looking to do things quicker. But that kind of muddies itself a bit, and they're kind of probably dipping into both a little bit, because there's no reason why a business user who has a bit of knowledge of code and maybe did a bit of coding in college or has a bit of an affinity, but might be able to push a bit deeper into learning just enough code to kind of to augment the kind of no coding stuff they're doing. But it actually reminds me of some feedback I got when we were trialing some of our courses, and a software developer actually came back to us and he said he'd never heard of citizen development, and he was quite sure he'd never heard of it again after that moment. So there clearly is some resistance or some of that feeling, but I think it's probably unwarranted, and I think for the most part it's probably going to be embraced. And it kind of reminds me that is it Ken Elson? Some old quote from the 70s that said, "There's never going to be," he goes, I can't see any reason why there'd ever be a computer in a home or a necessity for it. And I think that idea of citizen development is this kind of flash in the pan and it's going to go away, probably fits neatly in that kind of really poor predictions, because it seems like it's an unstoppable force, but for good. It's going to help developers, it's going to help business users, and probably in a kind of wider sense, it's going to help organizations. And exactly, I suppose, like you've been speaking about, the kind of need for hyper agility, the need for be like water, especially in the current environment we're in, we saw that more than ever. And so, yeah, it can only really be seen as a force for good.
Yeah, and I mean, so because I'm a software engineer, as I've said, by background, I kind of get some of the skepticism that might be there. But I think there's a couple of things. One is it's definitely going to be a hybrid world, right? And it's a spectrum of hybrid. It's not like a binary world where you go, oh, you're either a low-code business user or a no-code business user, or you're a high-code software engineer. There's a spectrum, and many of these low-code tools are hugely productivity enhancing for software engineers. Absolutely, it takes away some of the drudgery of some of the plumbing you have to do, etc. So I think there are plenty of low-code platforms out there already which are really aimed at developers anyway, and they will get productivity increases. What we'll have is low and no code that allows really non-technical folks, but people who are structured in their thinking. So you need a bit of analytic thought and, you know, sort of decompose what you want to do, and then be able to use the low-code tools to do that. And the business users who can do that, and everybody can, by the way, can then take that sort of edge part, if you like, of that spectrum. And I think they will go further into the spectrum, but yeah, it's not a binary. You're either a software engineer or not, and I think it will get blurred. But you know, I think that that hybrid world, it also is a partnership, right? It's not the business are doing something and then IT will do something else. They're actually working in tandem. And I think when we look at the top to the bottom, we also need the executives and the managers of the enterprise to kind of recognize that there's a partnership needed between IT and business. In fact, what we're actually saying in Capgemini is it's not IT and business. You know, every business is a technology business. Okay, that's one of the kind of phrases we use often in Technovision. We can't do anything without technology enablement. So let's not separate them. So I do see that there's going to be a really close, increasingly close partnership between IT and business. And what IT can do is help us with the rules of play, if you like, so that we can do things safely and robustly. I do worry about things like using the right data at the right time. So that means A, the data has to be right in the enterprise, but B, you know, folks need some guidance, and if they can have some ways of working, as I said, practices and patterns and policies. I know that Alvin was talking about the PMI book of knowledge. Definitely, you know, things like that are good references for folks to get started. But with IT, I would say it's not like I've read something and now I'm going to tell IT all about it. It's like join forces and both get on board with this movement.
Yeah, I suppose, and on that topic, it's an interesting point because, so from my experience of speaking with different people, I've seen that citizen developer can kind of find its way into an organization by a variety of routes, whether it is the business side saying there's a massive IT backlog, we need these apps built, and then they find that citizen development is a way that they can make that happen. Or it's from the IT side where they said, we need a way to get through this backlog in a quicker way, whether that's by using low-code tools to both improve how quickly they can deliver things, but also empowering business users to be able to do it themselves. But there's always the possibility that someone in a kind of a C-suite or a management position sees what, you know, when they're looking at the overall kind of digital transformation or the overall digital strategy of the company, they see that citizen development is going to be a key part in that. And it seems that it can kind of find its way in through a variety of avenues. So I suppose in Capgemini, what have you seen kind of talking with clients? What is the way that citizen development is kind of finding its way into companies?
I mean, I think it's a mix of those three things, right? So certainly some of the clients that I've spoken to over several years, actually, it's not even just recently. There's been both a bottom-up movement where the business and IT typically can see the opportunity of using low code to just, like you say, unblock some of that backlog. As well as the awareness of management. Now, it will depend on, you know, your enterprise, you know, in terms of how it's organized and kind of in a little bit of its sort of stage of digital transformation journey stage. But it's a mix, essentially. There's not one way to achieve it. I certainly think that, you know, proofs of concepts and, you know, doing something small and maybe assuring yourself or evaluating is essentially how that can help your enterprise, because you'll know the context of your enterprise pretty well, and then you can use that to kind of test and trial, if you like, as well as, you know, have the strategic messages about where it's all going, because where it's going is that CIOs and CEOs need more agility. CIOs are struggling to meet that demand, so there is a strategic goal that it meets as well.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm just seeing now that we probably only have about 2 minutes left, and there's a couple of questions. So we might try and answer them. So the first one came through. So I think we can. So let's see. Guisela, apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong, but they're talking about what professional development path would you recommend to take advantage of this citizen development movement if you're a young professional full stack developer? So I suppose the overall question is just how do you kind of, if you're a developer, how do you kind of get into the citizen development side of things? So, well, I'll give a kind of maybe a brief idea, and then we pass over to yourself, Dola. So really, and there's another question that's asking from Philip about what platform, and that's so it's maybe we can try and take them both as one. So the first thing you're probably going to want to do is understand what platform is kind of best for your needs. And last time I saw there were more than 300 platforms. So that is not necessarily an easy question to answer. So it's about doing that research and understanding what the different, and there's loads of information online about this, but what exactly this, like you said, some developers have been using these for years. So things like OutSystems have been around for, I think, nearly 20 years now, and that's kind of down the low code route. But then if someone who's a pure business developer, say a citizen developer, and don't have any background, something like Bubble is far more kind of maybe intuitive and easier for kind of quick web apps. But if you're a full stack developer, to Gozela's point, potentially you're looking more towards that kind of low code, maybe something like an OutSystems. And really, to better understand, I mean, I'm obviously going to say this, but to better understand the whole kind of governance and control that's required around it outside of the technology, usually recommend picking up our book on citizen development, PMI's book, and doing the foundation practitioner business architect course to really understand not how to just use this technology, but use this technology in a kind of safe, scalable, controlled way. What are your thoughts on that, Dola?
Well, I'll start at the back of your answer. I do think that part of convincing your peers and your superiors, your management, is by showing that there is a controlled way in which this can be done. Because there is still going to be in the back of the mind, oh my God, we're going to get thousands of applications being built uncontrolled, and we don't know, what's going on with who's doing what with what application. So having a view of that, there is a way to do this well. Is something that's important. So I agree with you on the PMI work that's being done. In terms of as a full stack developer, yeah, you're probably going to go down the low code route because you already have a background in coding, you understand how to code, and you'll have the productivity improvement by being able to not have to do everything in code, but be able to drag and drop components. Where then you also have the additional flexibility as an engineer in those environments is that you can customize these components that these low-code platforms provide a little bit more readily than maybe non-coders can, which is another a bit of a superpower, let's say, as you're making that transition into very productive low-code developer. I think you have all the tools as an engineer, if you're a full-stack developer, to be able to easily adopt a low-code platform. The fact that there's so many is part of the maturation phase. So somebody's mentioned here about MS Power Apps. Absolutely, we have clients who are aligning around the Microsoft's Power Platform, but there are a number of other platforms, and the reason is that it depends on the use case. What is your environment and what are you looking mainly to achieve? Is it process automation, or is it externally facing, or is it more about data and maybe reports and analytics? They still, there is not one solution that fits all. So do work with your IT colleagues and think about what kind of things in the backlog could get the most bang for buck in terms of low code and citizen development, and then look at what kind of platforms could meet that. And that those platforms as well, they all have their different sort of needs in terms of the IT infrastructure and the management of it. So you really do need IT to help you with that.
Yeah, perfect. I think our time is probably just about up now.
And that's when I pop in and I'm the angel who says, hey guys, no, this was fascinating conversation. I mean, a lot of the topics you covered, I mean, I could literally create a whole podcast just breaking down some of the things that you talked about, because they're very loaded, and in a good way. I think that talking about this idea of like this line that's kind of now blurring between like technology and business, and the fact that everyone has to take a certain amount of responsibility for technology, because as Andreessen Horowitz says, like every startup is a software startup, every business is a software business, and essentially software is eating the world. We have to take responsibility as this being a leading factor in innovation. Also, what I love is this idea of like, hey, this is very inclusive. There are terms like no code that we use in our company, but it's really just a buzzword. It's not trying to exclude people from this. And I think for a long time, there's been a narrative around, this is for developers, this is going to, put developers out of jobs. And it's like, well, no, actually, guess who's the best at learning new programming languages? Developers. Guess who already knows a lot of context for these technologies? Developers. So actually, developers, for them, these tools are also called visual programming, the ones who are low and no code. So it's like, it's just an opportunity. So there's an opportunity here for everyone. And I think that was really clear in the message that you said. And then I would also encourage anyone to learn some of the fundamental concepts behind this. And so, you know, the PMI book, for example, could be one of them. There are so many resources out there to just get informed around these concepts. Like, we no longer can just be like, we're non-technical, you know, like everyone has to take responsibility here. And the question is, how can different people take different levels of responsibility depending on where they're at? Dolo, Richard, really fascinating. I mean, you got me excited for the continuation of this event, and definitely to go and check out all the material that you have. So thanks for joining, and we're going to be moving into the next phase now.
Thanks, Christian. See you now.
Excellent. I hope everyone is doing good in their homes. I'm sure that only 30% of you are actually wearing pants, which is a great thing, being comfortable at home. Now, we're going to be jumping into a panel now, which is called Will Citizen Development Change the Way We Work? And we actually have several members of this panel. We have Michael Lonitas, who is a lecturer for TU Wine Innovation Incubation Center. Sorry about that. Sabrina Arkari, CEO of Arkari Solutions. We have Sam Sibley, Global Head of Citizen Development for PMI. We have Charlie Oliver, who's the founder of Tech 2025 or 2025. We have Victor Coopers, VP of Strategy at Citizen Development Expert Betty Blocks. So right before that, we're going to be jumping into a short intro video, and we will get this panel started with some more no-code, low-code, and citizen development fun. We're all here. Everyone's here. That's it. We've done it. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Some of you I know, like Michael, we actually jumped on YouTube the other day. Others, I'm really glad to meet you for the first time. I know that this conversation is going to be very exciting and bring a lot of different perspectives to the table, which is, I think, the point of what we're doing with this event, is to get people to understand all these different perspectives. People come here with different intentions, and our aim is to essentially add value to their lives. So let's start off with some introductions here. Maybe we can have Charlie from Tech 2025. You know, you could maybe just give us 1 minute about yourself, and then we can jump into the next person.
Sure. Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. I hope everyone's doing great today. It's great to be here. I'm Charlie Oliver. I'm the founder and CEO of Tech 2025, which is an innovation community and platform that I launched in 2017 as, number one, a direct response to my clients through Serve Fresh Media, which is my other company, marketing, branding, innovation, where clients were asking me, what's going on with AI, machine learning, what's happening? Oh my God, you know, how do we get our organizations and our staff prepared for what's to come? So we built this innovation community, and we began to offer solutions to companies to address that. Emerging technologies, getting your employees sort of up to speed, upskilled, understanding the ecosystem, the potential of the technologies, but also the downsides, the potential negatives, which is just as important, if not more. So we've been doing that now for 3.5 years, and we've been sort of saying that by 2025, we're going to reach a tipping point. We had no idea that the pandemic would speed that up. But when it comes to no code and low code, that's also very dear to my heart, because back in 2016, 17, and 18, I had a no-code client that was one of the biggest no-code companies at that time in the world, and they've been doing it for 30 years, no-code. And the fascinating thing is that back then, you know, I had to spend a lot of time, quality time, as I call it, talking to IT managers, you know, IT leaders, dev people, talking about what made these platforms work for them, what didn't, what they were looking for, what their concerns were. So, and doing events for them to sort of facilitate more discourse around that to improve the technologies. So did that for a few years, and we're here now today to sort of help companies to understand the culture that they're building through these technologies, which employees must participate in building that culture, defining it too. So anyway, that's the gist of it.
I love it. I love it. We all have to preach about this because it's very powerful. Let's jump into Maybe Serena, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Arcari Solutions.
Hi, great to see everybody today. I'm Serena Arcari, and I'm a project management professional, PMO executive by trade and training, and I came to citizen development on a very different path than Charlie. Ours was out of sheer desperation of trying to get out of the world of spreadsheets and sticky notes and get to a place where we had an ecosystem we could really manage a $40 billion capital investment portfolio. And so I from the executive side of the house, have walked the path on the bleeding edge of trying to negotiate with IT leaders and get them to a place of comfort with us creating our own applications. And so I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Well, thank you so much for joining. Michael, why don't you introduce yourself? Michael Lonita.
Hey, Christian, thank you very much. Yes, we have seen each other on my YouTube channel because as you can see, also my name in no-code apps is something I care about. I do that as a YouTube channel. I show people how to use tools to create apps. But you also mentioned that I'm teaching that at Technical University Vienna. So I know you didn't know that, but how to spell it, but it's really a Technical University Vienna. So wouldn't you believe, right? So they actually invited me to teach that because obviously no one else is, doing that stuff because it's very new, very fresh. And I'm very happy to do that. And it's kind of challenging also because it's actually developers, right? So they will ask me tough questions, which is good, right? Which brings me to that I'm a tech person, right? So most of my life, at least 10 years of my life, I've been coding or running tech teams. And now I have started a new business, which is not, my YouTube channel, of course, but it could be, but it's not. Instead, it's called Founders in Europe, which is basically a program to teach people how to create companies, right? How to fundraise, how to create products with no code as well, but also how to run teams, how to make sure they are motivated, how to make sure you build product and tech teams from the ground up, from zero. I already mentioned business planning, I hope, or not. If not, then business planning, very important. And we also invest in companies or in founders that have went through the education program that impressed us. So basically, that's me right now, taking my no-code knowledge into company building. And I think, Christian, you're doing very similar things, but in a different country. So I think it's kind of a logical thing to do. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Keep in mind, I am a tech person. I'm usually coding, and I'm kind of an imposter right now in this space.
I love that, an imposter in the space. Well, we're glad to have you here, nevertheless. Victor, why don't you give us a little introduction to yourself?
Thanks, Christian. Great to be here. So my name is Victor Kupers, Betty Blocks. We help companies scale their app development via the use of no and low code, our no and low code platform. And we have been focusing on citizen development for the last 3 years, I guess. We've been trying to push that agenda as we feel that we do need a new type of developer that helps us get rid of those immensely growing backlogs. So prior to this, I have been building apps as a non-developer, both in the enterprise, where I used to work for an insurance company, and in my own startup. So I've seen both sides. It's been really interesting to see what you can learn yourself without having the technical knowledge. And it's very empowering. And in my role at Betty Blocks, I try to get that enthusiasm out there and really show other people what is even possible with platforms like ours. That's
impressive. Yeah. I'm excited to see your point of view because it sounds like you really hit both sides of things, like intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. So that'll be an interesting conversation to have. Yes. Sam Sibley, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Christian. Hi, everyone. And first of all, I just want to say it's great to see so many people joining us from every corner of the globe. I think the session so far has been brilliant. Hope you've enjoyed it. So thank you for joining and giving up your time to be here. My name's Sam Sibley. I recently joined PMI as the global head of Citizen Developer, and delighted to be part of this panel today, talking about something which is going to have a huge impact on a lot of us, right? And I've worked in technology for most of my career, And this is by far the most exciting vehicle and catalyst for change that I've seen. So I'm fortunate to be leading that for PMI. So thanks for being here today. Back to you, Christian.
Excellent. And I'm Christian Pavarelli. Just to introduce myself for the people who are connecting, I am the co-founder of We Are No Code. I built startups for the past 15 years, have had exits, have also failed companies, and I've realized that as a non-technical founder, there are a lot of things that we face. And basically, when I became the director of a startup accelerator in California, and I was looking over about 400 to 500 startups, applications every 6 months, I realized there was just a big problem in the way that people were building their companies early stage, and they were usually spending way too much money and time doing so. So essentially, taking all my knowledge of training hundreds of founders and getting them into, to raise millions of dollars, and also getting them into accelerators like Techstars, Y Combinator, and all that, I just realized there's something to do here. And so We Are No Code essentially is a company that is focused on empowering non-technical founders very specifically. So let's jump straight into this conversation, because I think that there's just a lot to unpack. I think what we'll do is start off with basically, will citizen development change the way we work? I think all of us will say yes. So I think maybe we can each pick one thing that we think will change about the way that we work related to citizen development, no code, low code, and maybe we can open up the discussion once we get the all this exciting stuff going. Anyone volunteer for one thing that they think will be changing in the way we work? Serena, I didn't know we were doing hand call, but this is good.
I don't want to talk over anybody, but I think for sure one of the things that is changing now is, and it was mentioned in the previous session, we in the business who are not formally trained in technology can no longer stand in the place of, I'm not the tech guy. We all have to be technology savvy. We have to become familiar with these platforms, what they can do. We have to be good at recruiting these people who are going to be the developers of the future at their desktop. No more excuses. There are no endeavors that we're doing that don't include technology. So if we've been on the sidelines, that's over. And I think that it's not something that's going to be changing. It's here. And anybody still standing on the sidelines, now's your time to jump in. And there are lots of people who are willing to help you. So I think that's primarily the first thing that I would draw on is that we're all in the technology game today.
I love that. Victor, it sounded like you had something to bring to the table.
Yeah, I really like what Serena said. I think what we currently see is there's a lot of discussion what amount of time people in the business should spend on building apps, and what part of their role it should be, and how to describe it, and how much time they can spend on doing it. And I believe that will change really, really fast. It will become a part of the onboarding for new people in the company. It will become part of a program to teach the existing workforce how to make use of platforms like low and no code. So I think that is going to be a very vast process that's going to speed up how people enter new companies. And how they think of building their own solution. It's all about being self-sufficient and solving your own problems, and companies are going to expect that from their workforce.
I love that perspective. Sam, do you have any, I know that right now you're probably settling into your new role, and you probably have a lot of exciting ideas that are boiling in your head about what you want to do. So if you could share just one of those for us today, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, no, happy to. So I think the key thing here is that citizen developer is really being embedded into every role, into every kind of domain, right? So if you think about, for commercial leaders, the ability to actually build a pricing app, to be able to build a CRM system, to be able to build a pipeline tracker, to be able to generate alerts for their global sales force, this can be built in no code, low code, right? So I had the experience in my previous role at FTI Consulting where we actually ran our business from a citizen developer point of view on an Excel spreadsheet, and we turned it all into a no-code app. Then every one of our team could log into this app, could make their updates, they could track everything, they could get alerts, they could build timeframes, and that changed the whole way we worked. We probably cut down 3 or 4 hours a day collectively of manual effort just by using that app. And I think that is a small example from a commercial point of view, right? So people that you would typically never put for this, right? You'd never think about a commercial leader being someone that would be building one of these apps to drive their business more efficiently, but they can do it. And that's real proof that it works.
Love that. Michael, do you have some perspective here? I know you do. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, of course, I'm trying to keep it short, of course. So I think that it will change the workplace in the sense that people that were not able to automate things, which is typically financial department, HR department, right? So those are like the ones that are most forgotten, I would say, usually in companies. They don't have developers, and usually they don't have knowledge of how to automate things. So I think in those departments it can make a massive difference, because I mean, sure, I can talk about designers, product managers, developers, sure, right? It's kind of obvious. They can build stuff, but those departments, right? HR and finance, if they knew how they can use these tools to create automations inside of the company, mostly internal tools, that would be really awesome. And I think it can improve those departments a massive amount. I can see, so my wife, for example, is head of finance at Waterdrop, and they're doing a lot of Excel, a lot of manual things. And I'm scratching my head almost every day. I hope she doesn't watch this stream right now. How can you do business like that? I'm like, come on, man, I can go there and help you in like 2 or 3 days. Stuff will work much faster. Of course, I don't work there, but it's very frustrating to see it from the outside. So that's my take on this.
I love that, and I think it's a really powerful thing, because those of us who have already been converted and who, it sounds like we're all probably preaching this quite often. It's like we feel this responsibility, and we also feel this, I think Victor put his fingers like that. You see from the outside and you're like, let's get in there and get our hands dirty. We can fix that with one tool. We know how that's done. And it's, I think it's very exciting for all of us. Charlie, please, I'd love to hear your perspective as well.
So first of all, I have to say, like, yes to everything that I've heard just now. I mean, it's like you said, we're the cheerleaders, right? We get it. It's exciting. I think one of the major ways that it will change, and I'm sure everyone here agrees, is that the workplace companies will need, this is not I'm sorry for that horn. I apologize. Companies will need to see employees as partners. They will need to begin to redefine how they view what employees do and who they are. And that's not an easy thing. You have to see them as partners, or you may one day see them as competitors, because once you empower people to build and to create, you cannot put that genie back in the bottle, and you have no idea how that's going to take shape. We have people coming in and out of companies, like, there's going to be a lot of attrition over the next year, 2 years, right? If I'm all of a sudden empowered to build solutions that I know other companies need too, and I just might go ahead and do that, right? I might start my own business and take a few employees with me. So I think companies are going to need to, I think we'll see companies view and treat employees more as partners in the creative process. And I think with regards to that word empowering, I know it's a beautiful word, but it's also very difficult, because to empower someone means that you're shifting power, right? And so how companies handle that will have everything to do with whether or not they're able to successfully make that transition to a partnership with employees.
Wow. I want to go deeper into that, because I think there's a lot to unpack there, specifically in the fact that right now we see a lot of things happening in the market. We see companies like, Apple, Google, all of them saying, hey, we're hiring based on skills. We don't necessarily need college degrees. Then you have, work from home has become a thing. Now we're seeing a lot of pushback from people like coming back and being like, wanting to work in companies. And I think that certain companies will definitely be seeing this as a threat. But to your point, it might be those companies that are not realizing that this is a tremendous opportunity, and that they maybe have to put more effort in how can we, create more retention? How can we invest in these people's growth? How can we give sort of work situations to people where they're excited to stay in the company? And empowerment can be used, within the context of large companies for innovation in a way that entrepreneurship can't always, because you have all these resources in a company that you can leverage. So I think that intrapreneurship might be something that grows dramatically quickly. Well, what are some other takes? Everyone can kind of jump in at this point. Yeah, Victor, please.
Yeah. So I think this has been the struggle for maybe the last 20 years, because it's already happening. people are looking for their own solutions. They are trying to solve their own problems. The only problem is they do it out of sight of the people that are responsible to make sure that there aren't any data breaches or any other stuff that you don't want to happen inside your company. And so people have been doing this under the radar for years. And right now we have an opportunity to not only empower them by giving them the tools that IT knows are tried and tested and they can be governed, but they also make sure that people who use those platforms will not go under the radar and produce software that cannot be governed, cannot be controlled. So you're kind of hitting two birds with one stone. So that would be my take on this one.
Love it. I love it.
Yeah,
Sam, I have a question. Sorry, go ahead. Please.
I was just going to add, I think that sort of stays on the theme of what's going to change. I think that dividing line between the central IT department and central IT leadership and the business, it was always us and them. That's got to go away too. And I think there was a question in the chat about how do you keep up with constantly changing platforms? I mean, you have to be in partnership with central IT. You have to be working on the platforms that are approved by them, that are vetted by them, that are secure. You're not going to bring a breach into the company. So you don't ever want to get that label shadow IT, right? You have to be working within the confines and the constructs and the guardrails that central IT has put out. And this is the opportunity to really, truly partner with them and understand which platforms are available or are within bounds, and then go develop in those platforms. And, sky's the limit, I think, within the bounds and within the guardrails. And I think it can become a really synergistic relationship.
Michael, I see you ready to go.
Yeah, I wanted to mention to pick on where Charlie left off, and I think she said this empowerment, right? Because I was talking about departments getting the power, right, to automate their own things, maybe build their own internal apps, maybe even external apps, God knows. Maybe in the case of HR, they might have an app to apply, right, for their jobs, and they keep you up to date. And nowadays HR loves to create communities. Even if they rejected you, you can be part of the community. Maybe you get better in the future, right? Anyway, what I'm saying is also that with power comes responsibility, and I wanted to mention that shifting of power, that's absolutely true. You have to really make sure, like, you give the power to people to create stuff in any department, right? But then you also have to live with the result, right? And it has to, but that department also has to understand all these things that IT departments already understand, like data security, right? Like how to handle different platforms talking to each other, how you do login, where does the login credential, where are they stored, right? Are they stored somewhere in your IT servers, whatever machines, or are they stored somewhere else? So all of this knowledge, not all, but a lot of this kind of basic knowledge that every developer has or IT department must have, right, has to be somehow spread across the departments. It doesn't mean that they have to learn coding, right? But they do have to learn some basic concepts that every IT person has, because otherwise they'll be fired, right, if they mess up the data handling. And then, so I think that's very important. I think education, and I think PMI wants to do that. I heard, right? It's very important, right? You have to learn what is a database roughly, right? How do they relate to each other? What is data? Where can data be stored? How do you deal with GDPR when you do no code, right? Because every developer has to know that as well. And so you kind of give this knowledge and this power, but then who is responsible, right? What if it goes wrong and data is lost, or God knows, right? Then where do you go to kill someone? You know what I'm saying? And not in the bad way, but usually you go to the CTO, or you go to the head of tech, or you go to the team lead, and you say, what the hell, can we take care of this? But now it's very spread out, and I think companies might be a bit worried about that.
Can I just say, Michael, to your point, that's brilliant. And just before we move forward, the failure is a very important part of the creative process, as we all know, right? It hurts, but it's necessary. And when you're creating and creating, you fail a lot. And I think a part of the culture, and this is the culture end that I think Michael was talking about, companies will need to be very mindful and intentional about how they develop a system in a culture that embraces failure and doesn't. You do want to, check your employees and make sure that they're in accordance with what's supposed to be done, but you don't want to check them too hard or be too stringent, or, you know, I mean, this is a delicate thing here. You know, it's very easy to turn people off when they've been turned on to something and they're excited. So it's fascinating. It's just, yeah.
I think, and a lot of people are going to reap benefits from that. Michael, sorry, go ahead.
I want to add that I think it's a new role. Okay, really, I think it's a new role in the company, and it has to be taught and has to be learned. It's not like, you know what, that's my opinion, right? So if you're a startup, you can do crazy stuff, and that's cool. But in an existing company, if you want to embed this and this, you know, no-code approach, low-code approach, I think you have to have a new role that takes care of that, because you can't put everything on the CTO. You know, hey, take care of that as well. You know, so. Yeah, and I think that everything is tech, everything is software, like you said, and I think so. The tentacles of tech is gonna go into every department, but someone has to be responsible, right? And yeah, so.
Yeah, well,
absolutely. So it is about that accountability. Victor?
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, I think it depends on how it occurs in a company, because you have two ways. So one, you have the organic way, in which people just start trying out stuff, like I did. I was just frustrated with IT. I was managing a team of 14 people. I got these high targets and I didn't have the tools to reach those targets. And I got so frustrated that I started looking for ways to bypass IT. And because I had that mentality of trying to solve my own problem and not just wait for IT, I stumbled upon new types of development that I thought were really, really interesting. And for the first year, I just did it under the radar. I was very happy. But once I got on the radar of IT and they showed me what types of risks I was taking, I was like, oh my God, I should have involved them. I would have been even way further if I had involved them way earlier. But I do feel that you need those type of people, because if you start on the other side of things, where you think everything through and through, you can maybe not gain so much speed as you did organically. So it depends on how it starts in a company, what works best, because I see companies that want to think everything through before they start, and they never get started. So that's a problem as well.
We had a similar experience too. I mean, ours, I would say, was organic, and it was born in desperation. We did not have the money or the time to buy one of these big software applications off the shelf and go through 5 years of implementation across the enterprise. But we had all this manual transaction we had to solve for. And, you know, what I did as the enterprise PMO executive in the organization was to go to the CTO and say, look, you know, if it's on our desktop, is it fair game? Can I assume that you vetted it? It's secure, it's safe, it's all of that. And that was our first agreement, was as long as it's on your desktop, go for it. And IT themselves had no idea what they had put on our desktops. And when they started seeing what we were producing, then we started having to have further conversations about, you know, how fast we were producing solutions that IT, you know, was taking much, much longer to produce, and how it was making them look bad and things like that. So you do have to watch the politics and stay in close communication with the IT leadership. But I think back to Michael's point about a new role, you know, my guy from the PMO got hired by IT, and he is now the citizen development implementation architect. Right, so he's setting the ground rules for CD across the enterprise, and so it is a new role. And he awesome. Came out of the business, but now he's running an IT department. Right?
Yeah,
so
that's so. I mean, just the fact that you talk also about this, like the politics. Like you can't. It's not just like a startup, like kind of Michael said, where you can go and play around with stuff and build stuff, and it's awesome and it's quick. Here, there are already ways of doing things which are probably going to shift, but shift doesn't just happen by, like, you know, cutting the pie out. You know, it's like you need to really take a second to kind of like, and I think that taking a human first approach to that, where you sit people down at the table, you're like, listen, this is what's happening here. This is going to be a transition that we're, you know, going through, and everyone's going to be a part of it, and no one is going to be excluded. Developer over there, Sam, or Eric, sorry, I shouldn't have used the name of someone who's randomly on the panel as well. But like, you're not going to lose your job, you know, Eric, or, you know, like making everyone feel safe. And then I think in times where people feel safe, it's much easier to make these transformational changes internally. I wanted to now shift a little bit into sort of, this is a whole new set of skills. I know that, Sam, you have some very interesting perspectives, both on sort of your vision of where citizen development movement is going, but also tell us about where you see these key skills becoming a differentiator in the job market.
Yeah, no, thanks, Christian. So I'll start off with the job market and then talk about my perspective on the movement. So I think being proficient in citizen developer definitely gives you an edge, right? And we're seeing that more and more over the months and weeks that we're working in this area. Much like Excel and PowerPoint was a differentiator 10 years ago, right? You know, the key skills that people were looking for, hiring managers were looking for, citizen developer is definitely going to be a differentiator. And I think there's always an emphasis on improved efficiency. There's always an emphasis on enterprise transformation. You know, what skills are you going to bring to my organization to help me transform faster, cheaper, right? So I think this skill is a vehicle, right? It's a catalyst for change. And I think Alwyn referred to the concept of change makers at PMI, you know, the term that we're pushing, you know, people who can have an impact, people that can change, all right? And if you can actually maintain relevance using the citizen developer competency, then I think you're going to be staying ahead of the competition in the job market. And if I just, you know, I just want to make one point on the last topic, because I think, you know, we're talking about lots of areas around citizen developer and I guess some of the risks and what needs to be put in place. And I think it's, you know, it's really important to bring this to a level where people across every industry understand, right? And I know that Alwyn at the beginning of this, in his great keynote, spoke about a car analogy. And everyone loves analogies, so I'm going to give you another one, right, about a car. Okay, so if you imagine that every driver passed their test without any theory test whatsoever, they went straight to the practical test, got the keys to their car, and everyone was driving around. Imagine what would happen, right? You'd have drivers that would be turning up to the roundabout and not understanding the signs. They wouldn't know the speed limits. They wouldn't know the highway code. They wouldn't know what means stop and what means keep going. Right. So I think the output of that would be crashes. There'd be accidents, right? There'd be lots of accidents. So what we're putting in place at PMI is a vendor agnostic driving theory test. Okay, it's a set of standards and principles that you can work through that allows you to get from A to B in your car, Tesla, BMW, Mercedes, without crashing. I think that's a really critical factor. I think that's what's really, really been missing in the market is that standard.
Yeah, I really agree. And I think that a lot of people there's this thing with the vendors where you almost feel like everyone's pushing their own, agenda, which is kind of normal when you're a company, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that it's important to have more and more programs where essentially we say, hey, like there are so many tools out there. I think someone had mentioned, last time they checked 300 tools out there. And it really depends how you define. I think there's just a lot of education that has to happen on the front because, first of all, when we talk about citizen development or no code, we're talking about both building software, but also about automating systems. So when we talk about these no code, low code tools, there's really those two categories, and both of them connect to each other very well, but they're also dramatically different. And so people have to understand these concepts, but more importantly, understand that different tools are just a different tool set is going to be best suited for a different use case and a different person who's employing them. If you're someone who has no experience, for example, in building something, let's say with a no-code tool, jumping into a tool like Bubble is a little bit of a steep learning curve at first. If you have no context around like how databases work and all the concepts that sort of Michael was pointing to earlier, it's going to be an extra level of teaching things. So again, it has to do with the goal and then also the individuals, I believe. We have so many questions that are coming in from the audience. So I think what we'll do now is we'll kind of shift and I'll ask some of these questions and we'll have the entire panel sort of answer them. So we're going to start off with a question from Alex. Does citizen development mean I can use whatever tool I want as long as it's visual programming? ? In essence, what does it mean to be citizen developer?
So
crickets.
Well, by the way, that pause is very telling. Okay, right there is part of your answer. Okay, you asked 20 people what citizen developing is. I mean, it's pretty similar. I think you'll get a similar answer across the board, but there are shades of gray, and as we all know, there's so much that exists in those shades of gray that can take a position in one direction or a company in one direction or another. So. regarding the platforms, that I think most people would agree that it's, it needs to be sort of sanctioned by IT. Every company will have their own sort of approved. I mean, like we were saying, it's about 300 platforms and growing. And so you definitely will always defer to what your IT department, your department heads will tell you can use. Citizen developer is someone who builds solutions using the sanctioned tools of the company that you're working for, right? So it's specifically within that company. What I will add, though, that I think is really important, is probably sort of piggybacks on what we were talking about a few minutes ago, is that what companies need to realize, and this is sort of what we do at Tech 2025, because we build innovation communities around this, and autonomous innovation communities, that's what we specialize in, is that you can give people all of the guidelines you want, but the bottom line is that employees they're curious. They're human beings. They're going to go out into the world. They're going to join different no-code communities. They're going to take different courses. They're going to come up with their own ideas about what it is and what it isn't. They're going to bring a lot of those ideas back into the company, and they're going to infuse that into the development creative process. Companies need to be prepared for that, because in some cases those ideas or that they're picking up will be terrible, and in other cases they'll be brilliant. And I'll give you an example. I sat down. I mean, I actually participate in a lot of no-code communities, and I just listen. Sometimes I love to listen. Entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur. I love it, right? And I remember one time, this is one of the biggest no-code communities out there right now. I sat in, this was an open office thing. And after everybody kind of talked about their project, all excited, I kind of sat back and I said, I have a question. And then, okay, Charlie, I said, what can you tell me about the data collection, the data protection? What's going on? How is the data labeled? What happens if the app is compromised? Like, I began to ask these questions and everyone got quiet. And I said, okay. And they said, well, we don't really talk about that so much because we just want to build. And that's brilliant. But you get people who are in companies going out who don't know about this, and they bring that attitude in. You've got to find a way to temper that. So just think about it.
Very different approach, right? Like, I think that's where people have to kind of be careful. I think that, as soon as we take extremes where we're like, if you're trying to be a pirate and then you're like, I want to integrate, a team, then it's like, well, you need to understand there are the ways things have been done, and you can't just come in and disrupt everything completely. It has to be a process of essentially transitioning into that. So I think there's a lot there. Yeah, definitely.
I think it ties into this question that just popped up in the chat about the skills within the IT department. I don't think it's a matter of necessarily converting people within IT. I think it's for us in the business to learn about the critical components within IT, like what's the data integrity plan? Like, how do you keep data clean? Where does it get stored? What are the integration points between the various different applications in the core stack? What is the core stack? Who are the stack owners? You need to know that as the business side. Yeah, you can build your apps, but you have to stay within the guardrails that already exist in the organization. Otherwise, you're the one that's going to get fired, right? They will remove you as the problem. And I think this is the time where we have to stop being with business and IT. We're all in this together, and they have their expertise. They know where the databases are. They know where the integration points are. We have to leverage their skill set and their knowledge, and we can go do our development as long as it fits in within the ecosystem that exists in the company.
Michael.
Right. I just wanted to say something to every developer in this live stream. Developers are, I think, if you are one, you should be like celebrating right now, because how often did you have to explain data related or security or internet tech stuff to business people, and they just don't get it, right? And then now they have to do it themselves. Okay. Now they have to learn it. They have to, so it's much easier to communicate with each other once you understand, that it's not that easy, okay? You can click it together, but you have to also know some stuff. And I really love this movement. I'm talking as a tech guy also, right? That's why I said I'm an imposter a tiny bit, So I think it's awesome, right? Because communication skills are one of the biggest issues, right? Or communication in general in a company, people just don't get it, right? But just because they talk different languages, okay? Some people care about this, some people care about sales, and some care about data, platform stability, and some care about marketing and stuff. And they all have different agendas, and that's all great. But I think that if everyone has a bit more knowledge about actually how this thing is built and what is really relevant to take care of to keep it secure and stable, right? So we can go to sleep with a good conscience. Well, then it's much easier to make plans, right? Because you don't have to explain things 50 million times, or some stuff is already logical, right? So the meetings are shorter when it comes to creating some technical stuff, right? Apps, automations. And that's why I think education is so important. I think what PMI is doing, what maybe I'm doing with my YouTube channel, I'm trying to teach people, okay, these concepts, even if they're not tech, right? And so I think it's awesome.
Can I just, at one point, I think it's really important to talk about not only defining the opportunity around this, but also the ownership of risk. Is, if you think about the agenda of the executives and enterprises, it's really around the risk, right? So I think this is something we've all collectively got to figure this out. But I've heard the term kind of joint venture between IT and business come across a lot, and I really think citizen developer is a catalyst, right? It is an enabler. It's the ability. It's something that's going to create an environment that brings two very different teams in IT and the business together to get more done, right? And I think we across all of these presentations that you've had today, we've talked about agility, we've talked about time to value, we've talked about hyper agility in Alwyn's first presentation. This is all achievable when the business and IT come together and use no code, low code as an underlying platform to deliver that. And I think that joint venture and that mindset is really, really critical to our success. The quicker we can understand that, and the quicker we can understand how do we mitigate risk, then I think we're onto something.
Yeah, if I might add, Sam, I really like what you just said. I think it adds and it contributes to the work happiness as well. As I've been having multiple conversations with people both from the business and IT, and once they join in this way of work, I have had multiple discussions with developers who said, this has been the first time that I collaborated with the business on a project that I experienced the value immediately. I immediately understood what I was contributing and what I was adding to the team with my knowledge, and I saw the impact of it on our business. And on the other hand, talking to the people from the business, they finally understood why things are hard, why it's hard to build applications, and together they understood each other way better, and that contributed to a better workplace with happier people. And I think essentially that is what we're achieving with citizen development.
Yeah, agreed.
I love that. So I think now there's a couple of minutes left, about 3 minutes left, and I think that we've had a really interesting conversation. I think that at this point, there are probably a lot of things that we have left out, and what I'd like to do is maybe just have each one of us give a little bit of, if there's one thing that you'd like people to walk away from today, remembering, what would that be? I think for me, I would say something along the lines of, this is not something that's exclusive. Everyone has an opportunity within this field of low code citizen development, and also the fact that essentially everyone has to take a certain level of responsibility for technology, regardless of whether they're a marketer, an accountant. You essentially, I believe that there is now going to be the place where let's leave highly trained developers who have spent 10, 20 years of their life learning how to be technologists do the more difficult tasks. And then, other people don't have to bother them with changing a typo on the website. Yeah. Michael, what would your takeaway be in terms of what you'd want people to walk away from this knowing?
Yeah. I'm thinking if I should address tech people, because that's kind of my duty, or I should address everyone. But let me say that if you're a tech person, just very quickly, there is no point in programming your backend. If you do that, you waste a lot of time, unless you do something ultra complicated, right? So go check out Backendless or Xano. Really, I don't see a point why you should code your backend. It takes 10 million hours of your time, and it just doesn't make any sense, especially as a startup. Okay, so just saying. You get an API, everything is awesome. And as everyone else, if you're still coding, if you have in your company some kind of a programmed website, your company website is developed, you're in trouble, okay? Because changing a typo, like you said, or changing anything, you need always the developers. If you have the situation, oh my God, right? Go and use a no-code tool and recreate your company website so that you can change it anytime. Your marketing team can change it anytime. Because many companies out there, I was also in one of some of those. I always included no-code tools when I saw that. But if you have a page coded in, I don't know, PHP, God knows what, or even WordPress, if it has any limitations and you can't fix stuff without developers on that simple website where you basically sell your product, well, that's not good, right? So go ahead and try to recreate that page in whatever, Webflow, God knows, something that fits you. But there are so many tools. Maybe you don't know, but now you know.
Charlie, what would yours be?
That was great. I love that.
Yeah, me too.
It was awesome. So the first thing that I would say is that if you are an employee looking to sort of figure out whether you're technical or non-technical, it's the key to this is obviously going to be reskilling, upskilling, understanding, especially if you're non-technical, what cloud infrastructure is, data literacy. You should be taking courses consistently in data literacy, joining innovation communities as much as possible. That's really important. And understanding what you're doing, what's being done in your company with regards to automation, how that is changing the entire business community, because something is happening here. There's a huge trend globally towards automation of everything. So what I would say is definitely stay on top of that. You can do that by joining our community. You can join PMI, anything. That's important. The other thing I would say is storytelling is crucial. We tend to leave that out of the process, but if you can sort of get up on, take courses on storytelling and design, the creative fields, that's really important as well. And the other thing I would say is let's not forget that there are other things that we're not talking about with regards to automation. Is blockchain apps are automated now. There's no code blockchain, VR, XR. You can build no code anything. And so once those things begin, especially the more experiential, immersive technologies like VR, AR, look into those too, because when you talk about being able to create immersive experiences in companies, which is coming, because we're hybrid now and we want to be able to have immersive experiences with each other wherever we are in the world, that's really key. The last thing I would say is, if you're in a company and you're trying to figure out what to do, ask yourself what your company's digital transformation strategy is. Okay, if you don't know that, learn it. What is it? What are they doing? How successful are they? KPMG said about a year ago in their study that like 90% of all digital transformation strategies failed horribly. Why? I'm just saying, have a broader view of what's going on, not just on the function of no coding. So that's it.
Love it. I love that.
We're having an event in a few weeks, and Arjun from PMI will be there as well. And it's called "If Software is Eating the World, Who's Going to Feed the Beast?" And it's about
love
that title.
Thanks.
Sam, what would one takeaway be for the people?
So I think that this is inclusive and possible for everyone. I think the point was made. We can all be change makers, no matter what role we do. What I would encourage people is that you need to start by identifying something easy and quick and a simple business case where you think Citizen Developer can help, right? So once you've got yourself trained, you've understood the world and what it is and where you can fit in, you need to demonstrate a quick win, right? To Charlie's point, you really need to understand the overall agenda of the organization and how do you, as a change maker, make an impact quickly, right? So if you start small, start testing, start building, when you feel proficient, you can scale. You don't have to scale from the beginning. Just start with something small. If every single one of us started with a small idea to do this, think about how amazing this world would be without Citizen Developer. So that's the one thing I'm going to leave you with. Amen.
Yeah. And I think that's a very, very powerful point that you've just brought up. I think that more and more people have to understand that you have to get started to get, and oftentimes, we talk about this and it's very aspirational, but getting started is the hardest thing. Why? Because oftentimes we think that if we fail, what happens if we fail? It's like, it doesn't matter. That's the point of these tools. You could just try a little something. If it didn't work, at least you learned something. And so, yeah, I would definitely encourage people to get started. Serena.
I'm going to come from the perspective of speaking to my project management professional tribe and say that, look, I think we have a leg up here No one commissions a project to keep everything exactly the same. So we are, by being project managers, we're change managers, change agents. We're driving the change in our organizations, and we can't afford not to know about this. We have to jump in here and bring this automation not only to the project work itself within our project and our project teams, but as an output of some of the projects that we're doing. If we can automate some of the transactional mire that people are stuck in as part of the project, as a value add, we will be invited back over and over again. So I'm just going to call out to all the project management professionals out there, get on board.
I love that. We wanted to have all the different perspectives. So it's important for all of us to kind of like stay in line with talking to different audiences. Victor, last but not least, let's hear your words of wisdom for the community and what you think they should take from this conversation.
Well, thank you. So, as I stated earlier, I don't think this is something new. The opportunity here has always been there. People have been building their own solutions, but right now we're recognizing the fact that we need to empower people doing so. So it's already happening, and it's part of business evolution. So everyone who's in here and is watching us, keep pushing, spread the word, and please show us what you build and how you do it, because that's the only way to show the power of citizen development. And I'd love to encourage everyone to do so.
I love that. And I think we're really all in the same ship, where we're just trying to inform people and trying to empower people and at least try to, let's say, get people to avoid some of the issues that they would run into if they didn't know about this entire movement and about all these amazing up and coming technologies as well. I see even in the private chat that we have between panelists, we're all super excited. Under wraps, we're like, this conversation is so awesome. I can't wait. There's so much happening. So get involved. Follow everyone here on LinkedIn, Twitter, and wherever else, because we're definitely being ambassadors of this movement. And we're here to really forward not only the movement, but the people behind it. So I wanted to thank Victor, Serena, Sam, Michael, and Charlie for joining me today for this panel. It was amazing. And we're going to be seeing all of you hopefully in another panel sometime soon around the world. So yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Bye everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so this was a fantastic event. Again, I want to thank everyone who's come here. A couple little announcements before we head out. First of all, there is a 30% discount from PMI for their programs. So if you're interested in those, you'll be able to check out. There's probably going to be a link close to this video or that will be sent to you after this by email. Also, if you could give us a little bit of feedback about how you enjoyed this event or not. I know you had to listen to some of my dad jokes, so I really appreciate your patience with me. But, I think that overall, I wanted to thank PMI. I want to thank all the panelists who've come in from the fireside chat. I also wanted to thank Erwin. I wanted to thank all the people who joined for the panel. I wanted to thank the Second Digital Revolution for putting this on. All of this would not be possible without PMI really setting up this event and partnering with 2DR, Second Digital Revolution, to make this happen. Again, I wanted to thank all the members. I wanted to anyone who's organized. I wanted to thank Niels, who is behind and creating all the changes that you see happening automatically. They're not just automated. There is a human behind all of them. Sasha as well for his amazing organization of this. And again, if you haven't learned anything else, just know that this is an amazing movement that you can now look into, and you can empower yourself. You can empower people around you. Thank you so much for joining. We look forward to the next time we see you. And this was the Second Digital Revolution and PMI's event around citizen development. Thanks for joining, and see you all soon. Take care.